Welcome to the Shadow Warrior podcast. This is episode 117, and this is about the Indo-Canadian spat that's currently making the news. And I'm really delighted to welcome on board Hari Gopinath, who is in Denver. He is a geopolitics expert, in addition to being an entrepreneur and a technology expert. So, Hari, welcome on board, and let's spend the next few minutes talking about Canada-India issues.
Thank you. Thanks, Professor Srinivasan, for your welcome as well as, inviting me to this
No issue.
podcast.
No issue, Hari. We've had a lot of discussions offline, so this is good to finally
Right.
have you on a video or an audio podcast. So my basic question to you, Hari, is: see, we have this issue which kind of blew up far more than I thought. I mean, initially, my belief was that it's just Trudeau's hurt feelings. He felt ignored here, and then there's this pathetic photograph of him being hauled to his plane in a golf cart, and the fact that he was cooling his heels for a couple of days here, and there are some other allegations about how there were drugs found on his official plane, and then he refused to accept the presidential suite which the security people here had sanitized for him. So a lot of minor things, but I thought all this added up to general animosity from Trudeau because he felt he hadn't been given respect. That's what I think. What is your view of what's going on? It's much more than that, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. I think that said, I think Trudeau's rather childish personality did not make things better. Uh, Maybe some other person who is a lot more of a statesman would not have taken the choices that he took to sort of blow up this issue. And in the process, all said and done, Canada and India were there was like a sort of a benign relationship to the point that you cannot forget that Canada has over the years did help India out. For example, the can-do reactors that
Right.
India uses a lot.
Right.
It's like a Canadian design that they were nice enough to hand over. And India developed a lot of IP on top of that, but still, it's a Canadian thing. Closer home to us in Kerala, we have the Idukki Dam, which was like built by Canadian engineers, and they were the ones who were like, yeah, if you go to the Mulamattam power station
Right.
tunnels, they got this brass plaque with 3 Canadian engineers named there.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So yes, so yes, they had a lot of expertise in like this arch dams and things like that. So they were helpful, and Trudeau was unfortunately not doing any justice to Canada. Forget India. I mean, in the sense that way he behaves, way he conducts himself in public as the head of state of a prominent country, it's kind of like ridiculously childish. My original view is that Trudeau was delaying his flight because he probably had some Bollywood costume being stitched over at Jalandhar. and the tailor told him that he needs 2 more days. But that said, I think he came to this event already having a chip in the shoulder, and the way that things went, it probably must have forced his hand in the sense that all said and done, he is a princeling, and princelings are not exactly known to be empathetic to larger pictures or things like that. So in that sense, I do believe that it didn't help that it was Trudeau who is the prime minister. But if you go back like a few years back, this problem has been like boiling. It was kept at simmer thanks to Indian side being being a more mature about this and sort of trying to sort out things. We heard about how so we got these 2 factions that we are hearing about, Khalistanis even in Canada, and then we had the current intransigent faction, which is like the Niger and Pannoon and all those guys, and then we had the other faction that was actually talking to Modi government, and there was sort of a rapprochement that was being being
Attempted.
sort of pushed through, by Ajit Doval and the rest of the, and I don't know whether Jai Shankar is involved, but external affairs minister. But I think that this was more like a national security kind of a push initiative. Probably Ajit Doval was involved, and they were trying to make this sort of like tone down the whole Khalistani movement.
Mm.
And then we see this that faction leader getting shot in January,
Mm.
and nobody accused India at that time
Mm.
because that person was asking more about sort of like he was like making conciliatory noises,
Mm.
and then this Panoon and this Nijar guy is like sort of saying that we are not going to play ball, and at that time Trudeau didn't even like open his mouth, or for that matter none of the Canadian establishment had any issues at that time. Also, I'm sure that they were doing a lot of surveillance on Indian diplomats and things like that, who probably might have facilitated the talks. Then suddenly, like they decide that okay, this guy is just a humble Canadian plumber who was like a beloved community leader who used to hand out I don't know, little kittens to school children and all that stuff. And the way they are characterizing him as like a regular plumber guy and not a AK-47 toting terrorist, which is what he is. I mean, by his own admission.
Right.
And a guy who sneaked into Canada in the most foulest ways. And he even like got married to a woman, which he said in an interview was like total sham marriage. All this is like being like swept under the carpet by Trudeau.
Right.
When he makes that claim that a Canadian citizen, exactly, within quotes, got killed by Indian agents. Now there is this other point that I don't think if he had. So this is what I was like elaborating earlier to someone. So I don't think that they got anything like seriously incriminating, or he would have presented that to Parliament or to the opposition leader. If you look at like Poilivier's statement, he is saying clearly that he doesn't have he basically knows what everybody else knows. It's all Google and ChatGPT at this point. That Canadian intelligence.
In fact, the British Columbia Premier said that whatever was presented to him was pretty much on the internet. There was nothing more substantive than that.
And he clearly said that the CSIS, which is their premier intelligence agency, is the one who gave him the briefing. So if CSIS has got only stuff that you get off Google, that doesn't look really good. And why should Indian government take that give it any respect or seriousness is what I don't get. And then Trudeau keeps pushing this ridiculous line that India should cooperate with the investigation. It's like saying that India should cooperate with this sham investigation, which he wants to hoist the blame on India.
Right.
Who is going to cooperate for that one? If you look at like even the solid evidence that after the Mumbai attacks, we know that there were a lot of intercepts, very clear intercepts, voice identification of who was doing the controlling of the terrorists. Even those evidence was summarily rejected by Pakistan. Because they are smart enough to know that they don't want to incriminate themselves. So why should India allow itself to be, accused and incriminated by like this shoddy evidence that Trudeau seems to be like looking off Google?
Well, it's like the Fifth Amendment in the US, right? You are protected against incriminating yourself. You don't have to say
exactly
that will incriminate you. So anyway,
absolutely.
But do you think the Indian side could have handled this a little bit better? Would you have a thought as to how it could have been prevented from becoming this international incident on the one hand? On the other hand, I'm not sure that's such a bad thing because see, India has been very docile and mellow for many years. For example, in Canada itself, that Air India 182 bombing, which killed 329 people, quite a few of whom were either Indian origin Canadians or Indian citizens. And like you said, there was pretty good evidence that this was something that had been plotted in Canada, but nothing came of it, right? So they just kind of swept it under the carpet. So on the one hand, India has definitely raised the temperature here, but I'm just wondering if it has gotten out of hand. Do you think it's gone beyond what India expected it to be? And could it have been handled a little bit more softly? I don't know. What do you think?
I think certainly India looks like India did not expect it to,
Mm.
go out of hand like the way that this is being. This is a single-minded campaign by Trudeau and Trudeau alone, which seems to be, pushing this through. Now, if Trudeau was like any other princeling, and we have a few in both
Oh, yes,
at the national level and state level,
absolutely.
uh, then yeah, but unfortunately, he is the prime minister, and that means that when his voice carries a lot of weight, I mean, when he says this, so at that point, the Indian response till now has been very muted. This is more like, the message that India is trying to give is to like, let's talk this out, but we are not going to engage you at your level.
Mm.
So that's why Arindam Bagji, who is like the spokesperson, was asked to repudiate whatever was said, which is, I think, a decent response in the sense that if it was anybody else other than Trudeau, it would have been treated as a de-escalation
Hmm.
mechanism. Let's not overblow
Mm.
this whole thing. Let's just get the professional diplomats to talk it out. But that's not happening.
But there's one point there that MEA note. I used some pretty heavy duty language. It was not, diplomatic smoothness and niceness and so forth. It basically said you guys have no evidence, you have no proof, so you're just making things up in pretty harsh terms, which, again, as I was saying, may not be such a bad thing. India is saying, look, we will look after our own interests. We're not going to just roll over and die like we've done in years past. So it's a really tough one, isn't it, to negotiate, because partly because the other Anglosphere people also have had a muted response, and India clearly doesn't want to rattle their cages as well. Rattling Trudeau's is one thing, but you don't want to take on Sunak and Albanese and I forgot the name of the New Zealand guy and Biden all at the same time. So it's a pretty tightrope
Yeah.
war. But one thing I was thinking is this is not new in Canada, right? This coddling of terrorists there has been going on for a long time. And do you think it's primarily a domestic issue where Trudeau is going to face an election next year? And as you said with Bolivar, if you did an opinion poll right now, in fact, they have done some opinion polls, if the election were today, Trudeau would lose. So, do you think this whole thing, this escalation, has been principally for shoring up his vote bank? Because I believe that Jagmeet Singh and his party are quite strong in British Columbia, and in fact, they're keeping his that is Trudeau's government alive right now. So, you think that's what it really is, or is there more to it? We covered two angles.
Yeah.
One is his personal, irritation, and the second is the Khalistani vote bank. Is there anything more that you can think of that might be causing this?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so he's the one who pulled in the whole Five Eyes reference. None of the rest of the four eyes actually wanted to be part of this.
Right.
Never wanted a part of this. So way I see this is that the Five Eyes is probably like some kind of like a Google Drive for all sorts of intel,
Hmm.
and it just lies there,
Hmm.
dormant.
Hmm.
Trudeau, so whoever is the member of the Five Eyes will have to ask
Hmm.
this depository, hey, can you like pull up stuff X, Y, Z?
Right.
So Trudeau looks like he put a request after he came back
Yeah.
from India, not absolutely, like to use a PG Wardo's definition, mad as a wet hen. So then when he came back, he basically got this dossier that he hurriedly put up,
Yeah.
and in which he probably, the Four Eyes, I think we are giving way too much credit to the Four Eyes, first of all. Remember, these same guys could not figure out where was Bin Laden for 10 long years since his expiry date.
Right.
They could not get him. So the guy was dropping more videos than, I don't know, Yo-Yo, Honey Singh and all those guys.
Right.
I mean, they could not. The Four Eyes couldn't do nothing. So to
Yeah.
assume that the Indian Indel, who was actually, forget about the terrorists hiding in a cave. Indian Intel has actually had like a lot of successes, like spoofing things, including the nuclear tests in '98. They don't know how to do like secure communication. That is like ridiculous. So it's obvious that what the Four Eyes have is probably some WhatsApp group of IFS people, wherein like they said, "Hey, have you heard about this chubby plumber in British Columbia?"
Right.
And then put an LOL emoji.
Right.
And that I frankly suspect is the evidence that Trudeau is talking about. Oh, that shows that they are culpable. Look at them; they are joking about a Canadian's death. So now this I believe is the gist of his, or rather the whole basis of his allegation. Now, this whole Four Eyes. So that is why the rest of the Four Eyes are like silent. I mean, even Blinken is like saying, "Oh yeah, we shared stuff and all." Yeah, I mean, of course they shared stuff, because it's ultimately this Five Eyes is nothing but one big eye, which is the US. I mean, there's only one eye, and then there are these four other, those googly eyes you get from like like this the crafts shop for children.
Right.
Like you put, so those the rest of the four are just those googly eyes, in my view. They
Snow White.
contribute nothing.
Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, right? Another version of
Exactly. They all they do is they host US facilities.
Right.
And in return, the US probably gives them this benefit from the repository. You ask for a particular file, they will give it you.
Right.
That's all it's happening. And to believe that the Indian Intel agencies, who was acutely aware of all this tapping business happening around the world, will let themselves be incriminated. They are not caught in Pakistan. Like rarely do you hear about any person getting caught in Pakistan. Why would they be like so stupid as to like go and incriminate themselves? That too, this guy is not even a high value target. He's like a minor nuisance in India's scheme of things, if you look at it.
Right.
So none of this makes any sense if you take out only, like, it makes sense only if you, coming back to your question, it makes sense only if you put Trudeau in the center of the picture. Then you get the idea that, okay, this guy, it's all about himself. So he wants to be prime minister for life. It's very obvious. He feels he's born for that.
Entitled.
Which is fine. Which is fine. Yeah, I mean, he's a princeling and he thinks like that. Which is fine. It's between him and the Canadian people. But what's happening is, again, the point that you made earlier, that this is a nice deflection of his ineptitude and all, and his really listless government, by saying that, he's one of the greatest criticism online that I have seen about Trudeau is that he's considered a wimp among the world leaders. We all have seen videos of Xi literally like beating him black and blue in that little interaction wherein he calls him all sorts of names on his face, and then just walks off. It's like a really sad video.
Yeah.
So I think that criticism is like something that he's deflecting attention. Now nobody is, and he is the last person to talk about this freedom of expression. For example, he talks about freedom of expression when Modi and Doval and all raised the issue of that Indira Gandhi's assassination float.
Right.
Will Trudeau allow a float of the two towers going down, for example?
Right.
By, let us say, a Middle Eastern cultural association? will Trudeau allow like the sort of like a float depicting the awesomeness of Blitzkrieg
Yeah,
by some military like militia group or something like that?
right.
Blitzkrieg is like it's a genius move, but
Mhm,
you don't have that in a float,
mhm,
right? Because you won't, they definitely won't allow that under freedom of expression. Most definitely not.
right.
So that argument is rubbish because if you are saying that you are against terrorism, Indira Gandhi assassination is one of the worst incidents of terrorism against to a woman leader, which he claims like he's all about woman empowerment. So there
Gender.
are a lot of questions surrounding. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think his whole political stance has been most like what is like textbook liberal, current Western liberal things. For example, he was like draped in, I think he had his son dressed in like some kind of a pink dress and all for seeing Barbie, and then
Ah,
had
okay.
his daughter over for, so he is basically playing to that whole uh,
Audience.
what started off is in California has now become a liberal epidemic. The
Mhm,
whole
mhm.
rainbow coalition, that virtue signaling and all that. Oh yeah, my kid is off, is confused.
Right.
That's like a style statement. So Trudeau is like literally like leading from the front in that one. That actually is creating a lot of backlash, as he can see from
Mm,
the rallies, and
mm,
as well as all sorts of social media comments and all that stuff about like how he's trying too hard.
right.
So yes, I mean, so he probably thought that, hey, like India is a good punching bag.
Right, right.
Uh,
Easy.
yeah, let's give it a shot, and this will be considered a bold move around the world, his
Right,
word.
right.
And
Well,
unfortunately, it didn't go as
didn't
expected.
quite work out that way. So that's about Trudeau. But can I just switch our focus to Hindus in general? Okay, I'm just a little concerned. You have in California the caste law, SB 403, and then a number of other states are considering similar legislation. And the Leicester riots in the UK, right, where Hindus were affected. And then you have in Tamil Nadu, of course, Udayanidhi Stalin going around saying eradicate Hinduism. And now you have Panu, telling Hindu Canadians to exit the country. So, I mean, there is this sort of global, apparently, move to crucify Hindus, right? So what do you think about that? Is that real, or is it something that people should worry about? And I ask this question also based on the context here in Kerala. You may be aware that there's a lot of students migrating there. Just the other day in Cochin, 7,236 students at
Yeah.
one go, got their visas. So I'm sure a number of them are Hindus. Okay, so what does all this mean for Hindus abroad? What is your feeling about that?
Yeah, I think we can beat out Panun and Udayanidhi Stalin as the jokers of the pack, in the sense that both are like inconsequential in my view
Mm,
to Hinduism or Sanatana Dharma, as and both are unpleasant characters who probably should not be like allowed to give and like space at all in like any public setting.
mm,
That said, the California law is like very troublesome in the sense that it's probably one of the what I feel is going to happen is that uh, the law was sort of cobbled together by people who has got only like half knowledge about what, or even like we don't even know if they have got quarter knowledge about what the caste system, and there are a lot of negatives that we all know about, but you have to literally live through that whole culture and community to know what exactly would fix it. And frankly, India, which is still not able to fix a lot of the bad side of it.
mm.
So assuming, what is going to happen is that California will have their own assessment of how, it's like a half baked assessment of how to solve this issue.
Mm.
Now, what will happen is that this will get into textbooks that get taught in their colleges as, oh, this is the way to deal with the situation. And then that becomes like canon, academic canon. And then, matter of time before it comes to India, it gets pushed, this ideas gets pushed to India that this is the way to do it. We have evolved a certain consensus, and India did a brilliant, in the sense that, the brilliant thing about writing, getting Ambedkar to lead the writing of the constitution, negated a lot of the ills that crept into Hindu cultural aspects through caste system. But that happened internally. That whole slow process over the last 70 odd years, 75 years, is sort of like driven internally by compromises, by consensus across things. And still things, there are a lot of, places where like a lot of fixes need to be done. But there, unlike in US, there have been 2 or 3 bona fide folks from socially backward communities, like who are not like, sort of, so to speak, like affirmative action figures like Obama or somebody like that. We have got Mulayam Singh Yadav, we got Mayawati. All these people are like Lalu Prasad Yadav. And I mean, all these people are bona fide leaders who came up because caste was dealt with in a very consensus-driven manner by politics, as well as like, various organizations. And then, of course, the Constitution also helped the process, the one that Ambedkar wrote. Without all this stuff, California decides that they know better.
Right.
That is okay. California can do whatever things that they can do. But the problem is that, as we saw in the case of this whole trans mania, it sort of permeates all around US and then slowly to the Western world. And then it'll get pushed all over the world, in the Hindu world, in that sense. So there is that I would rate as the biggest risk. It's sort of it's kind of odd that this caste bill, from what I heard of and read, says that a socially advantageous caste person can complain against a socially disadvantaged caste. I mean, there is no such thing as like the checks, or rather the guarantees that Ambedkar has pushed to be provided to castes who are discriminated against. So basically, in that sense, like the California, that's why I'm saying the California law is like so badly made that it's going to be chaotic, because oddly enough, the everybody will be wary about what needs to be done, and it can be abused very easily against the very people that they claim they're trying to protect. I don't.
Yeah, I mean,
So that's.
I agree with you. If I may interrupt for a second,
Sure.
It's funny that Hindus who have been generally discriminated against in India, I mean in the US, right? When you go all the way back to Dilip Singh's sound, and the fact that early Hindus were given citizenship and then it was withdrawn from them. You know that whole story, right? Because only Caucasians were supposed to be citizens. And so Hindus applied for citizenship in the 1900s, saying, hey, we're Caucasian. And so they got citizenship. So then they modified the rule to be white Caucasians. So that means, Hindus have been discriminated against ever since, or from the beginning. And even in the Asian context, I remember when I was living in the San Francisco area, the Chinese were discriminating against Indians, saying that Indians were not subject to any of these things that would suggest they need quotas and other things. So all affirmative action things should only be for Chinese. In fact, they actively pursued that agenda. So what I'm trying to say is that Hindus continue to be not particularly protected by the law or anything. They're discriminated against, and then going inside that group and saying these people are discriminated against more, etc. So it seems like it doesn't have any substance like you were mentioning about Trudeau's allegations. Okay, and this particular case with Sundar Iyer at Cisco, that also has no context or no content to it. But anyway, my general question, I'd like to close off our conversation here, is to just finally, are we seeing this kind of backlash, if you will, against Hindu success, not only in India, but also in the West, because Hindus are noticeably doing well. You got Sundar Pichai and the guy at Microsoft whose name escapes me for a minute, etc.
Nadella,
Not a Satya.
Satya Nadella.
So is this, part of that backlash against Indians and Hindus that's coming out in strange ways in this episode of Trudeau?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things that I always advocate is that we should have follow what Martanda Varma, the King Martanda Varma did. We should employ our own Illinois.
Okay.
Basically, like, there will be a challenge.
Yeah.
The reason that India could not push back against European colonialists is because we didn't hire enough European soldiers or craftsmen or things like that. The only way that I see is that we should attract, in the medieval world, India was what US is right now. It used to be the place, not even China. It used to be the place from which culture used to flow out, science and technology used to flow out, basic wisdom and knowledge